Welcome to the realm of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. Enjoy listening. The sky of Etheria Colony was always the same. Artificial lights floated in perfect harmony, the atmosphere never changed, and the order remained monotonous. Zaina had lived in this cold system for years, but her soul had always longed to go somewhere else. Everyone born here obeyed the rules. Leaving was forbidden. Setting foot on Earth, that chaotic planet, was forbidden. Exploring, seeking freedom, questioning anything, it was all forbidden. But Zaina wanted to break every single one of those rules. She had been planning this for a while. She had memorized the security systems of the colony, calculated the escape routes. She had tracked the patrol shifts at the exit points, identified the blind spots. She knew there was a tracker embedded in her body, but she had also found a way to temporarily disrupt its signal. She was just waiting for the right moment. That night, the opportunity finally came. The colony's main transport hub was busy with a major cargo transfer. Zaina slipped into one of the cargo capsules unnoticed and silently left the massive space station. As she passed through the atmosphere with a slight tremor, her heart pounded wildly. After years of breathing Etheria's sterile, cold air, Earth's thick, dense atmosphere felt different. The capsule landed at the outskirts of a neon-lit city. The moment she stepped out, a strange sensation filled her. This world was unlike anything she had known. The scent of rain hit her nose. The humid air clung to her skin. The sky, the real sky, infinite and unrestrained, stretched above her. She walked under the neon lights, disappearing into the chaos of the city. People moved quickly, machines hummed, but everything had a rhythm. Unlike the cold order of the colony, there was life here. It was strange, but it was exhilarating. But this freedom came at a price. Zaina's escape sent shockwaves through the colony. Every system was put on high alert, and holographic notices appeared on every screen. Fugitive at large. Zaina. Report immediately if seen. Her defiance was unacceptable. She was an anomaly in a system that did not allow anomalies, and Etheria Colony had no tolerance for exceptions. She had no choice but to return. Staying on Earth any longer would mean that the colony's trackers would eventually catch up with her. Near midnight, she slipped into another transport ship and silently made her way back. But her return would not go as planned. The moment she stepped into the colony, unease crept over her. Something was wrong. As she walked home through the quiet, sterile streets, the artificial lights flickered faintly. The roads were empty, but she was not alone. She heard the footsteps behind her before she saw them. Silent as shadows, two figures emerged in the dim glow of the lights. Their armored bodies glinted with dark metallic sheen, their presence commanding. Their eyes, glowing red like burning embers, locked onto her. Zaina knew who they were. Pyros and Vex, the colony's finest enforcers. Their skills, reflexes, and loyalty were unmatched. Taking down even one of them was impossible. Against both, she had no chance. She didn't run. Instead, she stopped and turned around. Pyros stood still, towering like an immovable force. Vex, slightly leaner but quicker, took a step forward, his weapon humming softly as it activated. "You're coming with us." Vex's voice was cold, mechanical. Zaina tilted her head slightly, her lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. "And what if I don't want to?" For the briefest second, Pyros hesitated. He was the most loyal of all enforcers, but something in her voice caused a flicker of something unprogrammed. Zaina knew she couldn't overpower them, but there were other ways. She moved closer, her gaze never leaving theirs. "You don't have to take me in." Her voice was soft but held an undeniable power. Pyro's shoulders tensed slightly. Vex's fingers twitched over his weapon, but he didn't fire. "Come to my home," Zaina said, her tone gentle, almost hypnotic. "Perhaps I can convince you otherwise." It made no sense. The colony's orders were clear. Yet, somehow Pyros and Vex followed her. Zaina's home was cold, but as they stepped inside, she changed the atmosphere. She adjusted the lights, softened the ambience. Her movements were fluid, her voice a whisper of control. She wasn't provoking them, she was unraveling them, making them question. The enforcers had spent years following orders without hesitation, but Zaina introduced them to something new, doubt. Time passed, and something shifted in the night. Pyros began to falter in his convictions. Even Vex, once unwavering, no longer resisted. They were no longer enforcers of the colony. They were Zaina's guardians. By morning, the colony knew. The enforcers have broken their loyalty oath. Zaina has taken control of them. Panic spread among the colony leaders. Zaina was not a rebel, but if she could turn the most powerful enforcers to her side, fighting her would be foolish. Meetings were held. Discussions stretched for hours. And then a decision was reached. Zaina was not a threat. She was a force, and that force was now part of them. Zaina had changed the rules without starting a war, without lifting a single weapon. With nothing but her mind and presence, she had rewritten the laws of the colony. Pyros and Vex were no longer the colony's weapons. They were her shadows, bound to her side. The colony did not know how to react at first. The system had been unshaken for decades, operating like an unbreakable machine, its rules absolute. No one had ever truly defied the laws and survived. Yet Zaina had returned, not as a fugitive, but as something else entirely, something they had no protocols for. The enforcers, Pyros, and Vex had never once hesitated in their duty before. They were built, trained, and conditioned to be the unyielding hands of the colony's justice. But now, they followed Zaina without question. This was not disobedience. It was transformation, and it terrified the colony's leaders. Whispers spread like wildfire. Citizens saw the enforcers walking at Zaina's side, not as captors, but as protectors. Their glowing red eyes, once cold and lifeless, now followed her with something resembling awareness. The council held emergency meetings. Could they allow this? Could they tolerate an anomaly? If one citizen could break free, then others might start believing they could do the same. A message was sent to Zaina's home. A formal summons. She was to appear before the High Council immediately. She read the message, her lips curving into a knowing smile. The council chamber was a place of sterile precision. A circular room, gleaming white, untouched by dust or imperfection. The council members sat in raised seats, watching her with unreadable expressions. Zaina stood in the center, unflinching. Pyros and Vex flanked her, their heavy boots echoing through the silent hall. One of the counselors, a woman with silver-streaked hair, spoke first. Zaina, you have broken the colony's highest laws. Zaina met her gaze. I did. You abandoned your post. You left the colony without authorization. You tampered with security systems, evaded detection, and resisted capture. Zaina raised an eyebrow. Yet I am standing here unharmed. That must mean something. A murmur spread through the council. The silver-haired woman narrowed her eyes. What did you do to them? She gestured toward Pyros and Vex. Zaina tilted her head slightly. I freed them. The murmurs grew louder. The silver-haired woman's fingers curled into fists. They do not require freedom. They exist to protect order. Zaina took a slow step forward. Pyros and Vex followed her without hesitation. Then why did they choose me? Silence. The colony had thrived on a single truth. Obedience was survival. No one had ever questioned the laws because questioning meant exile, punishment, or worse, erasure. But Zaina had done more than question. She had returned with something no one had ever seen before. Power, yes, but not the kind wielded through force. It was something deeper, something the system could not control. And now, the council had to decide. The silver-haired woman leaned back in her chair, her jaw tightening. The others exchanged glances, waiting for her ruling. But there was no logical answer. Eliminating Zaina would not erase what had already happened. If even the enforcers had been swayed, it meant the system was not as impenetrable as they believed. The council deliberated for hours. When they finally emerged, they spoke a single sentence. Zaina is no longer in exile. She is one of us, The announcement sent ripples through the colony. Zaina was not just pardoned, she was acknowledged. Some resisted the decision, their fear of change clawing at their minds. Others watched in silent contemplation. But the truth was undeniable. The old order had already cracked, and trying to seal it shut would be futile. Pyros and Vex remained at Zaina's side, not as prisoners, not as mindless enforcers, but as something new, something the colony did not yet understand. Their presence was an anomaly that the citizens did not know how to process. Enforcers had always been distant mechanical beings, responding only to direct orders from the High Council. They were the silent executioners of the colony's will, unwavering and absolute. And yet now they moved with a different purpose. They walked the same streets as before, their imposing figures cutting through the neon-lit corridors, their glowing red eyes scanning their surroundings. But something had changed. The way they moved, fluid, unhurried, almost natural. The way they observed, not just for threats, but as if they were learning. The way they responded, not to orders, but to Zaina's subtle gestures, her unspoken commands. And the people noticed. At first, the citizens kept their distance, unsure whether to be afraid or intrigued. But the more they watched, the more they began to whisper. Pyros and Vex were supposed to be void of personal judgment, incapable of independent thought. But now they paused at market stalls, scanning the displays as if curious about the goods. They watched children race through the corridors, their heads tilting slightly as laughter echoed against the metallic walls. They observed interactions, simple conversations, greetings, acts of kindness with an eerie attentiveness. And most of all, they followed Zaina not as guards, not as superiors, but as equals. The High Council, despite its reluctant decision to accept Zaina's return, did not ease their vigilance. They sent observers, operatives disguised as civilians, to monitor her every move. Reports were gathered, discussions held behind closed doors. Was Zaina a threat? Or was she the key to something far greater than they had ever envisioned? Zaina, aware of the council's scrutiny, did not try to hide her actions. Instead, she pushed further. She brought Pyros and Vex into the training sectors, places enforcers were never meant to return to once their programming was complete. She had them test their reflexes, their combat techniques, their speed and agility. They exceeded all expectations, their enhanced bodies responding at an impossible level. But that wasn't what fascinated Zaina the most. It was how they adapted. Pyros adjusted his fighting style mid-combat, countering moves that had never been part of his original programming. Vex began analyzing opponents not just for weaknesses, but for patterns, learning in real time how to predict their next attack. They were evolving. The colony had built them to be weapons. Zaina had turned them into something far more dangerous, beings who could think, react, and most importantly, choose. Days passed, then weeks. The whispers turned into quiet defiance. Some citizens began questioning the nature of enforcers altogether. If Pyros and Vex could break free from their conditioning, what did that mean for the others? Were they all simply prisoners in a system designed to suppress them? The council saw the shift happening before their eyes. Control, once absolute, was slipping. A decision had to be made. They summoned Zaina again, this time with Pyros and Vex standing at her side in the grand chamber. The air was thick with tension. "You have changed them," the silver-haired counselor said, her voice tight. "You have changed everything." Zaina did not deny it. Is that not what progress is? The council exchanged looks, their years of authority clashing against something they could not contain. They had the power to shut this down, to reset Pyros and Vex, to erase whatever Zaina had awakened. And yet, deep down they hesitated, because they had seen it too, not just in the enforcers, but in the people. A new energy ran through the colony, a quiet revolution in the way citizens looked at their world. The system had taught them to fear change, but now change stood before them in undeniable form. Pyros and Vex remained at Zaina's side, not as prisoners, not as mindless enforcers, but as something new, something the colony did not yet understand. Zaina had changed the rules without starting a war, without lifting a single weapon. With nothing but her mind and presence, she had rewritten the laws of the colony. Pyros and Vex were no longer the colony's weapons. They were her shadows, bound to her side. Etheria Colony had always lived by unbreakable laws. But Zaina had become the exception, and that exception was a revolution.